Welcome to another edition of the Half-Hearted Podcast. We're just getting right into it. So my guest today has been on Just for Laughs, Icebreakers Comedy Festival, Zoofest, North by Northeast, in addition to Sirius XM and CBC Radio. And I feel like you're a headliner at like every club in Toronto, which is amazing. Give it up. There's nobody else here. It's just me. Patrick Hakeem. So thanks for being here, buddy. This is cool because like I told you about the concept of my podcast, that it's like I want to talk to comedians, and just because when I got into it, I noticed almost right away that one, like everybody has like a spiritual or like religious background, right? Almost everybody
comes from like religion,
and two, everybody really wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I told you about it. You're like dude, this is my background. I'd love to chat. So I was like, yeah, hell yeah, let's do it.
I told you, I think you were telling me that you speak about people's spirituality, where they came from, and I was like, I used to be like an altar boy for like Roman Catholic Church.
Yeah. So and I love the opportunity just because I don't like we've met a few times, but like we don't know each other super well. So this will be fun.
We've ever spoken to each other.
It's true. Without having like red lights in the background.
I'm like,
and
nice to see you.
Yeah, we have to keep it down while somebody else is on stage.
Looking great, Jay.
Thank you. Always.
Yeah.
I've been putting in the work.
You got to.
I feel like when
you're in your 40s, right?
I'm turning 41 in a week.
Yeah, you got to do it.
Yeah. I feel like when I started doing comedy, I just kind of used it to justify like really bad behaviors, just like drinking and not taking care of myself and staying up super late, and just like, so I finally, over the last like couple months or so, I'm like trying to, healthy body, healthy mind, right?
Like I'm in my mid 40s now. I'm 45, and I just lost 45 pounds in the last 2 years, which really put 15 years back on my life. So I'm like, do it, man. You'll feel amazing.
Of course. Have you seen Thomas Kellnan?
Yeah, he lost so much weight. That guy
he's looking
like
great.
30,000 steps a day. It's like
something
insane.
Crazy.
Just walking
just
everywhere.
Walks around everywhere. And he writes while he does it too. So efficient.
Yeah. He's like, I'm burning the end. I'm burning the candle at both ends. There we go.
Yeah. No, it's good. Try to supersetting comedy and fitness. I like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so maybe we'll just like start at the beginning. So like, just tell me a little bit about like your background.
So I'm born in Montreal originally. My father was a Syrian man.
Okay.
Who met an Ecuadorian woman in Montreal in the late 70s.
Nice.
And basically they got married, had me, and that's the beginning of it. My mom was Roman Catholic.
Okay.
My dad was Orthodox.
Okay.
And then he converted to her religion because he really didn't care.
Yeah, okay.
He was like, whatever, you gotta be Catholic, dope, let's be Catholic.
Yeah, I feel like that's a bold. Okay, so did your father being Orthodox Christian have anything to do with him leaving Syria?
I believe it did. It's kind of like my parents got divorced later.
Okay.
So I would see my dad. My dad moved here and lived in Mississauga, and I would see him for every summer, but he would never talk to me about these things. I learned more about him when he passed, but I don't think he ever fled. It was like a different time back then. That's when Syria was like, come to Damascus, the oldest market in the world. It's like, there's tourism still going on there. So
yeah, well, I always because I know obviously you don't want like to generalize, but obviously like the early 70s was also the time of the Iranian Revolution, and so like the Middle East. That's when I feel like the Middle East was heading in a Western direction. And then around that time, Islamic extremism, or I don't want to say extremism, at least but in that time, but fundamentalism was really starting to creep up.
They're like, we got to protect our culture, like Quebecois.
Yeah, I guess so, right? But I think, like I said, you don't want to generalize because it's not like at the same time, I did take a course in Islam when I was in university. Like I do know that I think it was around 25 years after Muhammad died, they had taken over the modern equivalent of like 26 countries. So it spread rapidly after that. So, which is why you don't see a lot of religious diversity in the Middle East now. Okay, so you went to Montreal, parents split up, went to Mississauga.
Well, no. My dad went to Mississauga.
You're Mississauga, yeah.
I'm still in Montreal. They both get remarried. My mom gets remarried to a Chilean man who's like also Roman Catholic.
Okay.
And then my dad gets remarried to my stepmother, who is Ukrainian based, who then later became like insane Pentecostal born again Christian.
Okay, and then
like televangelists in the 80s, Jimmy Swaggart, Jim Baker, all that shit.
That would have been the time of the. Do you recall the phrase the airport church? Did she ever go to that one?
No, I have no idea.
No, okay.
What is the airport church?
So there's a church by the airport that used to be called. So there's this thing called the Airport Blessing, and it was this. They called it a revival, like where like the Holy Spirit came down and people started speaking in tongues, like the miracles were supposedly happening, and it was
I
like,
will heal you.
And so it was like, but the Airport Church Blessing was like a huge event. I think it was the 90s, may have been or 80s or early 90s, something like that, where like people from all over the world were coming to Toronto just to go to that church.
So she probably 100% did, and I just never knew that she went there.
Okay, and so how much of a part did religion play in your life? Because I feel like you already went through, like, by the time, like, but how old were you when your dad married this woman, or how old was she when
she came into my life?
Yeah,
I was probably like 3 or 4.
Oh, okay, so very early.
Yeah, very. But
it's
early.
Like all the way in your life, you've already done all the 3 major umbrellas of Christianity.
So, I went to an elementary school called Transfiguration of Our Lord.
Yes.
Which across the street was the parish Transfiguration of Our Lord. And back then in Montreal, the English school system was split into Protestant and Catholic. So you were like put into school based on what faith you had.
Yes.
So, so I went there, and then a religion teacher would come like every 2 days, and we'd sing songs and the whole 9 yards. And then, like we went to church every other Sunday, or we weren't like we had to go to church every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And then like I wanted to become an altar boy mostly for the hang with my buddies.
Yeah.
and like to ring the bells.
Yeah.
During like, first of all, are you Catholic?
No, well, like my dad comes from like an Irish Catholic family, but by the time I think that he was done with it at a very early age, and kind of resentfully so.
Yeah.
So if I ever went to Catholic church, like I was aware of it, like I would go with my grandmother at like Christmas and Easter. Fair. But it didn't play a major role. Like I was largely raised non-religiously, but like Christian adjacent. Like we would go to church every once in a while, but like it was never an active part of my life.
Right.
Yeah.
So when they're like doing the whole ceremony, the host, this is the body of Christ, and then there's like that bell ringing.
Yeah.
I wanted to do that.
Yeah, it was something to aspire to.
Yeah.
Right?
I was like, yo, that bell ringing is the coolest thing.
You think
I'd like to ring those bells.
Were your buddies already doing it? Were you just like me and the boys, or you just took it over?
We thought it was like a cool thing. Yo, we'll get to hold the candles, the cross, ring the bells.
Yeah.
And then we're like bad because we're like, it's like the 80s, so we're like also smoking at like 11 years old and 12 years, and it's also Montreal, so you like we're smoking in the back of the church while
with the priest.
No, the priest but I wish Father O'Rourke would be like, hey boys, let me have some.
Yeah.
Of that. Yeah.
Well, I feel like my dad or my aunt would tell us about how their priest would get so drunk that one year he fell into the Christmas tree.
That's amazing.
So, and that was always a large difference because I don't know if you know my story. I became a Christian at the age of like 17, 18 after I did 10 grams of magic mushrooms.
Oh, I did not know this.
Yeah. So that's the beginning of my journey into Christianity.
Right.
And I went the evangelical Protestant route.
Okay.
That's how I got into it. And so we always viewed Catholics as like Christianity as something that they did culturally.
Right.
Where it seemed as though behaviorally, if you were a Catholic, you kind of do whatever you want, and then when you go to confession, you go to church, and it's which was always
you're
really
forgiven for everything.
Yeah,
just 10 Hail Marys, you're good, buddy.
You're all good.
It's all good. You could cheat on your wife next week again.
Right. That's right. Like I can visit other churches.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so which is always ironic because I feel like Catholic church is the least fun, but it's like you have the most fun outside of church, and then you go to like the super boring ritualistic one, whereas like Protestants are like, we're always about like trying to follow the rules, read the Bible all the time, and then we get to party on Sunday with the band.
Yeah,
right.
Like, the band's gonna come out.
That's right.
Like,
yeah, man.
A little bit of wine.
That's what I did. So before I started doing comedy, I was like a Christian praise and worship guitar player. Like,
okay.
Yeah.
And then what ended that?
I still go.
Okay.
But for me, it was more. I tell this story all the time, which is that I a year before the pandemic, I went into a pretty deep depression.
Okay.
And yeah, I was just not in a good place. And then I don't know. I was watching that Jim Carrey documentary, Jim and Andy. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have seen it.
Yeah, and so he talks about his dad. That line where he says, like, I learned that you could fail at what you don't love, so you might as well do what you love. And I was like, not loving the day job that I had, and kind of the realization, like, oh, I've gone through life always. Like I said, I wanted to be a comedian when I was 8. You know, right. And I was a theater kid. I wanted to be on SNL. And then I had this conversion experience. And then I kind of did the music route. And I thought the music route was how I should go. But really, I was always the guy making jokes, looking for jokes in every possible situation all the time.
Right. And then it came back to where you were as a kid. You're like,
yeah,
hey, this is all I wanted to do as a child.
This is all I wanted to do. And then once I realized that I needed to put that aside, because I'm kind of like an all or nothing kind of guy. And I was like, so I had a collection of 10 guitars or so, and I sold like 8 of them. I got rid of, like, I knew that this is what I was going to do, and I was going to do it, you know, to the best of my ability. And that meant having to give up a lot of stuff. And so,
yeah, it's a lot of sacrifice.
Yeah. It is like, I don't have a lot of friends. Like, my comedy friends are my friends now. Like, a lot of my outs.
That's what happens, man.
Yeah. A lot of my life is gone that I had before. And, you know, I'm trying to, like, I think I overindulged in comedy to a point where I'm just like, I need to, like, reinvest in my family. And
but that's what happens. It becomes like addictive in certain ways.
Yeah.
And especially if you're trying to get better at your craft, you're always challenging yourself to do more. What went wrong this time? Even if you're doing comedy for 3-4 people or other comics, you're like, how come it wasn't as funny as the other time I did it? And you become obsessed in getting better.
Yes.
You start meeting people that are doing the same thing as you. You start relating to other people.
Absolutely.
And they become some of the best friends you've ever made in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You bond over this craft, right? And people who aren't in it don't understand. Right? Like, I had Sam Norton on last, and he was talking about, like, it's an addiction, right? Yeah. Like that time when you're on stage is the only time you're ever really happy.
Yeah,
right?
But it's also like after you get better and better, and then you start killing.
Yes.
And then you start chasing this dragon of killing that, oh my God, it wasn't as good as this time that I killed. So you still feel like it's not good, even though it's amazing.
Yeah, you want, I know I'm incredibly hard on myself.
Yeah,
and
that's the way to be.
Well, I mean, it's just you want it to be 10 out of 10 every single time.
1,000%.
And you tell yourself, if there's got to be a comic who could have won this room, and like, what would they have done? It's like partly like when I talk to a pro like yourself, like, we'll get to it, but it's like, I always want to, anybody who does this for a living, I want to extract as much knowledge from as possible so I can get better.
Okay.
But anyway, so going back to your childhood, so like, what kind of kid were you then? So you're smoking by 11 and like having fun with the boys. So I'm guessing that religion really didn't play a major part in your adolescence.
It did, because it's there every day in school.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yes.
But it's also like, you're living in Montreal, which is like, at that time is like, you know, I used to joke about it, but this is true. By the time you're like 10, 11, 12, you can go into any corner store, or as they call them there, dépanneurs.
Yes.
And you could buy a case of beer, a pack of smokes, and any hardcore porn magazine you want. And then they most of the time, they didn't bat an eye. They sold it to you.
Yeah.
Or 2, they'd be like, what are you doing? Like, this is for my father. And they're like, oh.
Perfect.
Get out of here.
They were pretty loose when it came to vices.
Yeah. So it's like, even like, you live 6 to 7 minutes away from any strip joint.
Yes.
In the city, you're seeing constant like XXX ads everywhere. At the time, it's like the mid 80s. There's like also like erotic theaters in different neighborhoods. Yeah. So it's like constantly pushed on. Like, have you been on St. Catherine in Montreal?
I mean, maybe.
So St. Catherine is like one of the main streets downtown, and there's like an institution called Super Sex.
Oh, I think I've seen that.
Yeah, and it's kind of like these comic women. They look like vampires, but they made like the writing in the same font as the Christopher Reeves Superman movie.
Yes.
So I remember being a kid, just the font attracting me because I was such a huge Christopher Reeve's fan.
It's got the word super in it. It's halfway there.
It's halfway got the there. Font. And I was like, oh, this is, and I remember being like, so it's like, it's like I was a really good kid, but I did really bad things that all my friends were doing at the time.
Yes.
Like,
yeah, I get that.
Like
I think
smoking at a young age and like just fucking being like, it's the 80s too, so everybody's like, yo, just go out and come back when the lights turn on. You're like, okay, cool.
Because you said you're mid 40s, so you're Gen X.
Yeah,
right?
I am Gen X.
Yeah, and I'm born in '82, so I'm like that cusp.
Yeah, like,
we both grew up watching The Simpsons.
100%.
Right, so that's our people. But yeah, we were the come back in when the lights turn on kind of.
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
like the last group to not be helicopter parented.
So we were just doing a lot by ourselves independently, and I remember look, it was bad, dude. Like I remember they used to have like this video store that had like you just had to make a membership, and then there was no like person attending it, so you could like punch codes to rent like the most hardcore porn
and
ever.
There's no
and you're like 11 years old watching it with all your friends, and then being like, all right, we gotta go be an altar boy on Sunday. I wasn't the best student. I did like talking a lot in class. High school, I changed. I became really bad. Yeah. Suspended all the time.
Were you a fighter?
I did get into a few fights, but I was more like just a troublemaker.
Okay.
I always was talking back. I was always not invested in school for my education. Mm-hmm. It's a social thing for me. I ended up being sent to alternative schooling. Okay. I went to a school named Doorways. Which, yeah.
It literally just sounds like we're just trying to find any option for you to have a future at all.
We started school at 8:30, finished at 1:30. There was no...
Amazing.
There was no lunchtime. They just wanted us to get us in and out of there. We had one recess after 2 classes, and then the last 3, and then, like, go home.
Okay.
And they had a special bus come get us because we were, like, delinquents from every Catholic school, high school, all put into one place. Yeah. And, we would call our teachers Frank and Fred because they wanted to be, like, relatable to us. Classes were smaller. And, it was just insane. Like, I wasn't I am, to this day, still a high school dropout. I have never graduated from high school. Yeah.
Okay, so, I don't know if I want to keep going more into your... So, do I want to talk more about the spirituality stuff? I think so when did it ever really play it? Like it was part of your life in terms of the time spent, but like internally.
Internally, I think it played a big part of my life. You know, I believed in God at one point, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, all this stuff. I think my stepmother's being a fanatic.
Yes, fanaticism. Yeah.
Fanaticism really turned me off.
Yes.
So, it became a point where she thought everything was the devil.
Okay.
Like, this song is the devil. Batman is the devil. He's got horns. I'm like, well, he just, like, saved everybody from, like, the Joker who was going to gas everybody to laugh themselves to death. I think he did some good here, but whatever. Yeah. And I remember, like, as a child, they gave me a book called Stairway to Hell.
Okay. Yes.
So I'm like 10 or 11, this book, and it's all about, like, how the music is the devil, and if you play like Stairway to Heaven backwards, it says My Sweet Satan.
It's reading into everything in major popular culture, why it's wrong and why you shouldn't be a part of it, and how it's going to doom you to hell forever.
And then I remember like there was like these little stories in it too about like this satanic cult in Massachusetts killed this woman. They decapitated her head and played soccer with it, and I'm like. But this, like, later in life, I Googled that stuff. You can't find an article relating to it.
So you're referring to what was called at the time the Satanic Panic.
Yeah, the D&D Satanic Panic.
Yeah, that's right. And then in retrospect, there were all these news things about it, but then there was never any concrete evidence about anything but then there were things that would like intimate at it, like the Son of Sam murders in New York, like. That was kind of attributed to it, but there was never any direct evidence. But that was also during a time like the Reagan era, where Christianity and the church played a major role in politics and regulation and law.
I mean,
and really loomed over the culture.
I still think it does in the States to some degree. To get those like Bible Belt states, you gotta like play up how devoted you are to God and Jesus if you want those votes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just remember like at 15, 16 questioning religion.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just made like a choice in life that I was going to try to be the best human being I can possibly be without religion.
Mm-hmm.
Just be good to people as much as possible. And I'll be honest, the person who taught me that was Peter Parker. So I was super into comic books.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be like these heroes where I was like, these guys are so good.
Yes.
And I just based my code of ethics on Peter Parker and his superheroes.
Maybe Jesus would play a more major part in our culture if he shot webs from his hands.
Well,
right?
I did have the picture Bible, which was like a comic book version of the Old and New Testament.
Okay.
Gift from my stepmother.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So I read that.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. So I know my stories.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. So you decide to go on your own. Did your stepmother? I feel like your dad didn't care, but did your stepmother care? Was it obvious, or
So they had their own problems.
Yes.
So my dad cheated on my stepmother at one point.
Okay.
My dad was a notorious cheater. That's why he's not with my mother.
Gotcha.
So and then like she forgave him, which I was always like, this is insane.
Yeah. You should leave him.
But she apparently. So I found this out from my uncle. Is they were brought into their parish,
mm-hmm.
and so my dad was a big con guy, salesman. He's a first salesman for Creed's, which was a department store in Toronto here, like Holt Renfrew back in the day. And basically one time they had this mass where he was supposed to ask for forgiveness in front of their parish for cheating on my stepmother.
Yes.
And like the pastor put his hand on him, and he like pretended to have like a spiritual awakening in order for her to believe this, but it was all fake. He had just conned them all into forgiving him, and he just started going into like spasms, which is hilarious. But I found that out
and that's
after he passed from my uncle.
And that's all it took.
That's all it took.
That's so funny. I mean, that's the sort of stuff that's nuts, though. So like when I first had my Christian experience, and I a year and a half later, I go to Bible college. I got into York and U of T for theater. Didn't go, went to Bible college instead.
All right.
And I go to the airport church, and they do that thing where, they do something and you're supposed to fall over.
Yeah.
And I didn't fall over because I'm not going to fake it because I ain't no bitch.
Right.
But like you don't fall over, and then they look at you like you're broken.
Yeah.
Like, why aren't you falling over? I guess God doesn't love you as much. And I always hated that. The performative aspect of it. Like, we don't live in a world like, when we go here on Sundays, crazy miracles happen all the time, and when we leave, nothing happens.
Nothing happens, exactly.
Right? So I always thought that was interesting. Okay, so you drop out. When did you drop out of high school? Like, what grade?
Mom, if you're watching, I'm sorry to break the news to you. I've been pretending I graduated from adult ed for a very long time. Okay. So basically, I was like hanging out. So Montreal has like a big club scene that you can get into when you're like, back then in the early 90s, you were like 14. You can go if you had like a friend who had like an older brother, they would get you into the club. You had bottle service. It's just an insane city at this era. And I was just partying a lot from the age of 14 till about 25, 26. I was going clubbing. That's all I cared about.
So I just partied for a little bit. 12 years.
Yeah, 12 years. 12 years of my life down the drain, going to after hours, doing raves. I was smoking a lot of weed, partaking. I never partook in cocaine and stuff like that, but I would partake like in MDMA and stuff like that. Wait, hold on. I don't know why I came here. What was the question?
I was just asked when you dropped out of high school.
Oh yeah, so I just kept going to adult ed.
Yeah.
During this time where I'm doing all this fucking drugs and everything, and I would just tell my mom that I was going, but every time I'd go there, I hated school so much that I would wouldn't attend the classes. And then one day I was like walking on the street. I'm like, why am I going to high school? I don't want to graduate. I want to be, at the time I wanted to be an actor and a comedian.
Okay.
I go, why do I need an education for this?
Yeah.
And I go, the only person I'm doing this for is my mother.
Yes.
Why don't I just tell her that I graduated from adult education and end it all? Yeah. And that's what I did. I was like 20 or 19 and I was like, oh yeah, I graduated. Now I'm going to do what I want.
No questions asked.
No questions asked.
How long did you live at home?
So I lived at home in stages. I lived at home. So being a Roman Catholic, it's like you cannot leave.
I've heard this.
Until
you get married. Right, yes.
They want you to stay. They want you to save money, ideally, until you get married. But I was nowhere close. It was just butting heads with my mom. So I moved out in my mid-20s only to do that thing where you like fail.
Yes. And
you come back. Then I was an assistant as a PA for my buddy who had like a production company in Los Angeles for a couple of years. Okay. I spent some time there. And then I spent a lot of time being a manager at a call center in Montreal. Okay. And I actually opened up an office in Vancouver for these guys. Okay. So I spent some time out there as well.
Nice.
Yeah. So.
Well, that's cool. Like you're seeing the world already, and
Vancouver and Los Angeles, the world.
North America wise.
Yeah, North America wise, cool it was like pretty cool. And then when I was a PA for that guy in, he was like an Armenian guy. He brought the national orchestra from Yemen.
Yes.
For a North American tour. Yeah. And I got to do a 10-city tour with Kohar, which is what their orchestra is called. Okay. And they were like 150-piece orchestra, and I did that as well. So that was pretty cool.
And was this like, how did you break into entertainment?
It's just a guy that owned the video store that we used to frequent, my buddy Guido and I.
Classic.
So I grew up in a very super Italian Catholic neighborhood in Montreal. Okay. So all my friends are all Italian but me.
And were they French or English speakers?
They're all English speakers. Yes. So we went to English school.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Did you manage to come out with French or no?
Like I speak French well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Je parle français vraiment bien, mais il y a des fois que des personnes veulent parler anglais avec moi parce que mon français est pas vraiment bien or good.
All right.
Yeah. Is your French good?
Terrible. Terrible. I always because my last name is Rainville, so I always love going to Montreal and hearing how my name should be pronounced.
How is it? Ranville?
Ranville?
Yeah.
Ranville. Nice. Just change it to Raintown.
But yeah. What was I saying?
No, I just asked how you broke into entertainment. So you're saying there's a guy who owned the video store that you and Guido.
He was producing in Los Angeles. He had moved to Los Angeles. Okay. We kept in touch with him. He was a guy who was like 8 years older than us. So we were like renting Eddie Murphy Delirious at 8 years old. Yeah. He's 16 and he's renting it to us.
Yes.
Because it was his dad's video store.
Yeah.
So he had me work out for him for a bit, but I didn't get into entertainment, dude. I did all the wrong things. I was a manager at a call center for a while.
What was the call center for?
So we did derogatory credit.
What does that mean?
So it's basically you call people and you tell them they've been pre-approved for a credit card.
That's
what
right.
They don't understand is the pitch, unless they ask you, it's a secured credit card. And if you don't know what the difference is, unsecured credit is what you have.
Okay.
Right? So basically you apply, they give you a limit. Mm-hmm. You're good to go. Don't go over this limit. There. A secured credit card is your credit is so bad that the only way that they're going to give you credit is if you secure the limit by putting a deposit. So if you want a $1,000 credit limit, you're going to have to give them $1,000 in order for them to give you that limit.
Gotcha.
So if you fail to pay your bills, they'll X your card and pull this $1,000 that you've already paid for. But for people that are looking for a way to rebuild their credit, it is a good way to start. But when you're not telling people...
Well, was the interest rate astronomical too?
We don't even know.
Okay.
we're basically, what we do is we'd sell them a binder that just had applications.
Oh, okay.
And then we would fax out all the applications, and then they would get approved for a secured credit card.
Oh, so you're almost like a middleman for poor credit cards.
But you're not making it sound like that.
No, of course not.
No.
Right. If they knew what they were getting into, they wouldn't do it.
1,000%. And I was doing that at downtown, and I was making like insane money. I was making like, I'm talking about like I'm 20, 21.
Mm-hmm.
I'm making between $700 and $1,000 a week in Montreal.
Wow.
In 2001, 2. I have no concept of money. I've been mostly grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with my parents.
Yeah.
And my stepfather, and so now I have all this money, and I'm just spending it. I'm going to the best restaurants. I'm buying clothes.
balling.
I'm partying. I'm dating, and I just have no concept or structure of how to get myself to do the things that I want to do.
Okay, and then, so at what point? Well, did anything follow credit cards? Because I feel like we're approaching the place where you start to do the things that you want to do.
Yeah. This lasts until I'm basically turned 25, 26.
Okay.
And I remember lying in bed, and I'm like, I'm, a quarter of a century old.
Mm-hmm.
You have done nothing.
Mm.
And I stayed in bed for 8 hours, lying there when I made this realization. And people were paging me.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's how long ago that was, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I didn't have a cell phone, I had a pager.
I had one.
And I was like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I wasn't answering it because I was just so... And I was like, what? You wanted to be an actor. You wanted to be this. Why didn't you do these things?
Mm-hmm.
So it took a while to reprogram myself because I had been such a shit for so long.
Yeah. Well, and I bet it's pretty hard to walk away from that money.
Well, I became depressed. I don't know if you get this reference. I started showing up to the office like Jim Morrison in the later years. Like full beer, just like not caring, late all the time. Yeah. They fired me.
Yes. Okay.
And then before I took a dive into comedy, I did go through a stint where I was a script writer for Brazzers.com.
Wow.
So this is so the company's based in Montreal.
Yes.
They own Pornhub. They own all like the sharing sites, and I did that for a year.
Yeah.
And then a good friend of mine, Christina Rosato, she's an actor, and she told me to start
in what?
No, in classic film.
Regular.
She's like
regular.
Yeah, she's like a real actor. She's like, she goes, you're still fucking around. You should take an acting class. Mm-hmm. So I ended up taking this acting class with a Meisner teacher named Jacqueline McClintock. Okay. And there I met, there was a comedian in class named Sugar Sammy.
I've heard of him.
Yes, yeah. He's big.
Yeah, he's big. Yeah, he's massive. I think I saw a billboard with his face on it not too long over the summer.
He was in my class.
Cool. All right.
And we became fast friends. Mm-hmm. And he was like, he kept encouraging me to do stand-up. Yes. And he was like, he would tell me, he's like, dude, he goes, the thing about stand-up is half of it is being likable, mm-hmm. which you are already. And he goes, the jokes will come and go. Just do it. Nice. And even with him pushing me, it took a year until I took the dive and signed up for an open mic in Montreal. Yes. I was like 30. Could you just get that closer? Yeah, of course. Here they go. Yeah. Sorry. No, that's okay. No, my bad.
I've been playing with your levels, so that's good.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's good. That's good.
Oh, yeah, I sound so much better right now.
Yeah.
I was 31 years old.
Okay, so you got at it a little bit later than most, I feel like.
So I was doing acting, improv.
Yes.
And stand-up was the thing I wanted to do the most, but I was the most afraid to try.
Yes, because it meant the most.
It meant the most. Mm-hmm. And then I remember there was a club called the Comedy Works in Montreal. Okay. And basically you did your, you sign up and they had a competition. Okay. And it was called The Boom, which was run by a comedian named Iman Al-Hussein. Okay. Which is, she now lives in New York. And basically you would sign up and the audience would vote and whoever won that night would compete in a monthly show on Sunday for a guest spot on the weekend. Yes. And I did my first set. I did my 5 minutes. I won that night.
Nice.
And then I ended up losing miserably in the competition later for the month, which was my second set. So I went from doing so great to bombing.
Wait, you won a competition? Your first set ever was a competition and you won?
Yeah. The only competition I've ever won. Every other competition after that, I lost.
Yeah.
But once I did it, I started really understanding that this is the thing I should have been doing
the whole time.
Yeah,
man.
And once I started getting addicted to that.
Yeah.
And once I stopped with the nonsense and focusing on the stand-up, all the best things in life started happening for me.
Okay.
So after doing comedy for 2 years in Montreal, at the time, you weren't really getting a lot of stage time in Montreal.
What year would this have been when you were in that 2 years?
So this would have been 2010.
Okay, 2010. Yes, and from what I've heard, the English scene in Montreal is small.
Very small.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever do comedy in French?
No. God, no. I don't want to. I have no interest. But it's also like, the thing about Montreal, it's smaller. It's a lot more supportive and not as... I find sometimes certain, not for me, but when I see younger comics trying to get into the scene here, I do see like it being very cliquey and people being not as supportive as each other, kind of like mean.
It's I started in the middle of May 2021, so we were still technically locked down. Like my first sets were in backyards.
Nice.
And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and but what I had always been told, like as the club started to reopen, was that the scene was like way more mean previously in Toronto, and I already thought that it was kind of, I wouldn't say mean, but definitely cliquey, cold, and it was, I found it difficult, but I always kind of just blamed it on the fact, like, I'm starting at 38, like I'm easily like maybe a decade older than the average age in the scene. So it's like nobody wants, like, I'm not everybody's like go-to person for like a friend to like hang out with or like put on shows. So you kind of get, for me, I felt like I needed to prove myself on stage more than anything because with a family and a day job, I couldn't infiltrate it socially as well as other people could.
Mm-hmm.
So I really just had to, let what I do on stage do the talking to kind of get me places.
Right.
But yeah, going back to what you were saying, it's socially, it's tough to navigate. I think that part of it is kind of what I've heard of people who left or gave up on doing stand-up simply because of the clickiness and the social element of it.
Yeah, and I was encouraged by older comics there. So it's like, I used to like, so if you were hot in Montreal and up and coming, if you got on like 2-3 shows a week, you were killing it.
Okay, yeah.
So that back then.
Yeah.
And there was good comics like a guy named Massimo, who I'd later move into a house with in Toronto, who I looked up to. Another comic named Rodney Ramsey.
Okay.
Mike Patterson, shout out to him, always letting me on his Tuesday show, even when I had no business being on the show.
Cool.
And another guy named David Pride that I looked up to.
Okay.
And after a while, I started starving for more stage time because I was obsessed with getting better.
Yes.
And a comedian by the name of Dave Merhaj came to Toronto, and he had won a homegrown competition in 2011, which was basically they Just for Laughs used to have like this comics from Toronto, this one's guy from Calgary, and they'd have like a competition, and somebody would win the homegrown show.
Gotcha. It was almost like a city's comic battle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Or even a province.
Sure. Fair.
And so he had won that year, and being a Montrealer, Just for Laughs was always a huge part of my summer because I love comedy even before getting into it. So I'd go all the time, and so I had been doing comedy for about 7 or 8 months now, and I was like hanging around, going to parties, and people were always telling me, like, oh, the best comic is this guy from Toronto, Dave Merhaj. You got to see him. He's Lebanese, and I'm half Syrian, so for I appreciate another Middle Eastern comic, and a person of color.
Yeah.
So I remember meeting him at the bar at Comedy Works.
Okay.
And we had met, and I asked him, what are you doing here? And he goes, oh, I just won homegrown.
Okay.
And I swear to God, I looked at him and go, what's homegrown?
Yeah. Is this weed?
Yeah. And he goes, and Dave Mirage has like a kind of like, he talks like this. He's like, man, he goes, man, you a comic? You don't know what homegrown is? And I'm like, no. And he looked at me like I was this unicorn.
Yeah.
Because I was so like just naive to it all. And I was just there to socialize. I didn't care that he won homegrown.
You weren't there to social climb and
no,
stuff.
I was just kicking it. I was just kicking it.
Yeah.
So we ended up talking for an hour and a half that night. And, I'd asked him about Toronto, and he told me, you can do 3-4 shows a night. They're not like amazing, but if you're looking to get better at your craft, you should go. And I asked him, like, if I come down there, would you be able to would you be able to like show me around a bit? And he's like, I would love that.
Nice.
So I ended up making a decision that I was going to move to Toronto.
Okay.
And I moved to Toronto in January of 2013. I wanted to save up money because Toronto, like, the expense level from Montreal was going to be this huge jump. So I worked at another call center doing business-to-business directories and saved up my money.
Yeah.
And then took the move to Toronto. And when I got here, I started making Dave. He would come back for the next year. I strengthened my friendship more with him.
Yep.
Some other comics named like Alex Pavone.
Yep. I've heard of a lot of these people you're talking about.
Yeah,
I don't know if I think I met Dave Mirage like once, like and very briefly. So
very nice.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Another comic named Mark DeBonis.
Yeah.
So these guys were like hot comics from Toronto, and they were all encouraging me to come.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came, I had a good bond of friendship with these guys, and they helped me avoid a lot of bullshit that I would have had to if I came here cold, which I'm always very thankful. Dave was super hot when I moved here, and we ended up living together in a house. Dave, Massimo, another comedian named Dan Bingham who now writes video games for Ubisoft.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and Massimo.
Yeah.
And that is probably one of the most fun times I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
And things started working out for me. I was fully involved in comedy. I was happy. I was meeting some of the people that would become my best friends in life ever. Mm-hmm. And, I believe I was starting to attract positivity towards me. And within a year of moving here, I met my wife.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. Who's also another comic.
Yes, I saw that on I creeped your Instagram to ask some questions. So I was going to ask. So when did I just see you posted 4 years of marriage?
No. So I think I didn't post this anniversary, but we've been married for 5, together for 9.
Nice. Oh, okay, great. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And then no kids. Kids?
0 kids.
0 kids. No plans.
0 plans.
Yeah. What is that like being in a relationship with another comic? Because I feel you guys will gonna have very conflicting. Yeah, I know. I'm the asshole. Very sporadic, different schedules.
So it's so when I met Jen, there's a lot of comedy couples that brand themselves as a couple.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever seen that where they're very
actually I'm doing a show this weekend at Levity, and originally the producer said I want you to middle, and then he's just like, Juliana wants somebody else to middle, and then it was her boyfriend Alex Handy. I'm like, well, fuck me.
Yeah,
I guess, but I still get the host, so
that's dope. So basically, I remember when I started dating Jen, I go, we had a conversation where I'm like, she was like a younger comic than me.
Okay.
By like, she had just started, and I was already like 3 or 4 years in. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, for me, it's like, I don't want us to be like a comedy couple, like a unit.
Yeah.
What I do is my own like individual journey.
Yes.
And yours should also be there. If we get booked on the same shows, cool. I'm not looking to get you booked.
Yeah.
This is your own journey, and this for me is like But then, after when I became a headliner, I was like, I'm going to get my wife to middle or like.
Well,
host.
And I mean, especially if she had just started, that's just you. There are some things that you need to go through yourself, right? Like
exactly.
you can't, there's no way that anybody can like vouch you into being a good comic,
100%,
right? Or vouch you into experience.
And the reason I think we work is because we barely ever talk about stand-up.
Okay, yeah, that's cool.
We're both doing it.
Yes.
So it's like, other than being like, laughing at somebody or being like, that person's a shithead, ha ha ha, shit talking, or did you hear this? That's crazy. Yeah. You know what I mean? Other than that, we don't really talk about comedy. Like, I don't be like, well, that joke needs the rule of 3 or like, we don't do any of that.
Okay.
We enjoy each other's company. She's one of my best friends. We just can kick it and no one can talk about anything. She's like super cool. She's very laid back. So that's why it works. I'm like the crazy one, like in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I think that's why it works is that we're not competitive with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And anything that she gets, I'm super happy.
Yeah.
I want her to get things. I want her to get things that I haven't got. Like, I don't care.
Yeah, I think that's I think it's very human to be jealous, but I mean, like, I don't know where I heard it from, but it's like, I don't want somebody else's journey. I don't want somebody else's story.
Exactly.
Right? So anything that's good that happens to somebody else was meant to happen for them, because that is what landed in their path on their journey. And so it's like, there's no sense in being anything other than happy for them when that happens. Like, obviously it might stir up, like, especially for me being new, like, oh, I wish I could get those things, but I just try to, I will feel that and then move on to, let's just be happy for people because it was never meant for you anyway.
I mean, the only thing you can work on in comedy is your craft and being nice to people.
Yeah.
And everything else is extra. When I started stand-up, I was super naive. I was like, why? If you asked me, like, when I started stand-up, why do I want to do this? The answer was, I want to make people laugh.
Yes.
Period.
Yeah.
I didn't think about, I mean, obviously being from Montreal, JFL was a dream.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in Montreal, they won't consider you successful until you come back home and do Montreal, which I have not. Yeah, it is, what was I saying? Oh, sorry.
You were just talking about just the comedic journey and like attaining certain things and how you were saying at the beginning all you wanted to be was funny.
Yeah.
Right. And I really resonate with that because
you were saying like you get jealous of people.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like I said, I think that's very human, but it's like how we handle that is.
I think it happens when you're a younger comic.
Yeah.
But then when you get older and secured with your skills and stuff, you're just like, whatever. They're going to pick who they're going to pick. I don't know why. Why am I going to sit this? At the end of the day, I have good friends, a nice wife. I make a good living. What else can I ask for?
Well, yeah, and I think for me, especially, I don't know, I would say earlier, even in this year, I was like, I want to get on this, and like not getting onto certain things, and like being just utterly devastated.
Right.
And now I'm just kind of like, this, no matter what, this is going to be a long journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So I'm just like, I'm just going to focus one show at a time and just try to be the best I can be, and then the rest will happen when it happens.
That's the best way to go about it.
Yeah. So. At what point, how long had you been in it before? So when you moved to Toronto, you presumably had some sort of day job.
So at first, so I moved here with like $5,000. I was like, this is going to hold me. I'll get a job quickly. So I was looking for a job in a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up having so much fun with these guys that I went through like all my money within like 6 weeks and did not have a job yet.
Yes.
So now I was getting into like trouble. So, family, people have lent me money to keep me afloat. And then I ended up, a comedian named Dylan Gott.
Yeah.
Got me a job. He was a person that would hire people for a catering service called When the Butler Did It.
Okay, When the Butler Did It.
Yeah, so I worked for them for a while.
Yeah.
And then I got let go from. I stopped working there. I didn't get along with a lot of the people, and then I ended up becoming a bartender for a place called 99 Sudbury.
Okay.
Which is near what's that?
99 Sudbury.
No, it's near the theater center.
Okay.
And then I became the supervisor, the reluctant supervisor there, and I was the supervisor there for like 4 years. I would do wedding events, bartending. They would have like video game like openings, like Mortal Kombat's having like a showroom. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I also, Jen and we started a dog walking business called
cool.
We Will Walk You.
Nice.
And that's to be honest, like that's, we still do that because Jen and I are passionate about pet care. We love doing.
I mean, it can be a good living.
It's an amazing living.
Yeah.
It helps me be like, I'm not gonna go to London for $200 to headline.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome because that was going to be my next question is when did you move from needing to have a day job to going pro with comedy?
So I am different than any of the other pros you'll have at this show.
Okay.
I have not done comedy outside of Thunder Bay. To the furthest I've ever gone to headline is Thunder Bay, and the furthest east I've ever gone is Montreal.
Okay.
So I have been doing comedy for 13 years in a very collected area.
Okay.
And I am I just go headline like from like Hamilton to Ottawa to Montreal to Toronto.
You just stay in here.
Yeah.
And do you have those types of aspirations to like tour the States or to do more with it?
I do.
Because I feel like you've got the credit. And the reason I say that is I feel like you've already got the credits to do that. If you wanted to make the jump to the US, you could.
I think it's like, to be honest, it's like when you get married to somebody and they don't want to go to the States, it changes things.
Sure.
My wife was a caretaker to her dad, who recently passed.
Okay.
And, she was doing that for 4 years. He had Parkinson's. There is a part of me that wants to venture to the States. I do think I come across more as an American product. I feel like I would enjoy trying to do things in New York. But I also don't want to be apart from my wife.
Yeah.
So I'm caught into that situation. It's like I'm releasing an album now with Comedy Records.
Nice. Okay.
So I think with that it'll help me get a visa.
Okay.
It's also really hard to get your papers.
I mean, so I've heard, and also just as you were saying that, it kind of made me think of what you were saying earlier about the sense of like all you really want to do is make people laugh, and if you're doing that, if you're living out what you want to do, you've got this dog walking business. It's like all of that would be gravy, but it's not required. This is kind of what I'm taking from it.
I have a very good life now. Now we're at a place in our business where we could hire other people. Business is very good.
Yeah, great.
But just getting my paperwork, also all my dots. Like I think I'd start with a visa and just start going on visits to see how it is.
Yes.
My wife has told me like if I wanted to move that she'd be okay with me moving and we'd work on it. But dude, I'm like 45, man. I don't know if I have it in me to go to another scene, start again, live in a apartment in New York City with 4 other people to afford the rent there, and start all over again in my mid-40s.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
I don't know if I have it in me, man.
Yeah,
like I don't know if I could do that.
No, that's it's very
honest.
It's hard. Yeah, it's honest. It's hard to hear as somebody who started late.
Well, dude, it's like, would you want to be apart from your wife and move to New York?
Not apart from her. I'd love it if she came with me.
She came with you.
Yeah.
Is she into coming with you?
I don't think we're there. We're not. There's no point.
You're not there yet.
Yeah, there's no point in having that conversation right now.
But does she know that you would want to move in the future should your comedy get to a place that you...
I'm not sure if I want to approach it that way, to be honest with you. I think if I can be bluntly honest, which is because like I own a house, I've got kids, I'm married, I've got a day job.
I got
you. Right, with a pension and all that sort of stuff. And so the only way that I'm going to, especially when it comes to the job, the only way I'm going to bail on that is if it's replaced.
Absolutely.
Right. Right. And so, and one thing I noticed, and it's not to denigrate anyone, I think it's more of a comment about the state of how Canadians in Canada views art, which is the fact that it's incredibly undervalued. And so I started in the comedy scene, and one of the first things I noticed is like I'm meeting people who have done Just for Laughs. They're writing on TV shows. They're, you know, they've gotten to the top of the mountain, so to speak, in terms of Canadian comedy. They were also on Serb.
Yeah.
And
because Canada's not paying you like
they're not paying you
like
for
the
that.
The United States is paying you for these writing
right.
jobs.
There's like have you ever heard of Jerry Corley, the joke doctor?
No.
He used to write for the Tonight Show, and he's kind of the guy that I learned how to do comedy writing from. And like, you know, there are guys in the States who are, you know, making six figures doing comedy that you've never heard of. Right, just tour around the U.S. You can tour around the U.S. You can tour around the U.S. and make your living, no problem. You can
tour around the U.S. All the C clubs and make a living.
Right, and in Canada that's not possible. And so what it showed me was that you can do everything there is to do in Canadian comedy, and not have a living to show for it. And that isn't something I'm interested in. Of course, I would love to hit all those milestones and do all the things that there are to do in Canadian comedy, but what I would really rather have is a career. Right. And so to me, that's why I'm doing stuff like this and trying to increase my social media output, because I think that there's another way of doing it, and I want to go that route instead. I think I would rather create an online presence where people in the U.S. are like, would you come? Yeah. That's what I would love to build toward. And then you're right.
Exactly.
And so and that's why I'm okay with taking it slow, where the social media and the stand-up I work on in tandem. So whichever one hits, the others there too.
That's something kind of I need to work on myself. I think like Gen X is a very like don't talk about yourself type of fucking generation. Yeah. We're too cool to like talk about ourselves. Like no one takes pictures of salads and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I do have to work on I rarely post, and it comes out of like not being accustomed to doing posts. I'm also not comfortable personally being like, look at me all the time. It's very uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
Which I have to get over.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only way. I'm seeing guys who are in their early 20s with, you know, Instagrams of like 70,000 followers and stuff like that. And so, you know, there's a guy I know who I'm close to he's a comic, like he does comedy, but he earns his income online.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? So many guys like that.
And he's like, get eyes on you and then sell them something. So I'm like, I'm going to try to do that.
He's not wrong.
No. And so it's like, to me, it's like, I would love to have, because ultimately what I want is freedom. I want to do what I love, which is making people laugh and doing creative stuff and having conversations like this. Like I'm trying to build the life that I want, and it's like if I had the life I want, I would have a podcast. I love talking with people. I love doing shit like this.
You're fantastic. And by the way, I find your voice very a great soothing host man voice.
Oh, thank you.
Like you sound like you're perfect for hosting a podcast.
Oh yeah, I mean, I just this is what I would love to do. What I want is I want somebody to like sponsor this podcast and like do stuff. Like I love doing this in addition to doing stand up, and it's like I want to create the life where I get to do all the things I love and get paid for it. And if that, you know, if it means I never get on Just for Laughs, okay, I'm still earning a living doing what I love, dude, right? Like
it's all about earning a living.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of out doing, is trying to create the life that I envision for myself in the future, and like what about that can I do now? That's kind of where I'm at.
That's actually really good. I should take your advice.
I try. Yeah, so just take a chance at stuff, right? You're I think my 7th guest or so. So it's like, you know, start small, fail when no one's watching.
Absolutely.
And build and do something cool, and hopefully it pays off. That's what I'm trying to do, man.
I mean, and also work at your craft.
Well, I mean, always. Yeah, I got a roast tonight. Excited to do.
Nice. Who you roasting?
Her name's Allie Moore. She's like a St. Catharines, Niagara comic. Okay, nice. And
right there, a lot of jokes about St.
I know, right? Ready to go, locked and loaded. So going back to comedy, was there when it came to are you a writer, or are you work stuff out on stage?
I'm a work stuff on stage.
Okay, so was there
like I have an idea and then I need to like mash it up on stage.
So then how do you, because like I'm definitely lean more towards like right.
Yeah.
And then
my wife is a right.
Yeah. And how do you like increase like punchline volume? Like how do you go from like having a single idea that might lead to like one big punchline to filling it with laughter?
Oh man, this is an interesting question. Because I never really think about how my process is.
Well, I mean, if you want to, if I could rephrase the question, is like, what advice would you give to a newer comic? Like, what pitfalls would you say would help? Like, how could I get better faster? How can I, like, if I wanted to ask the underlying question, how do I get better faster?
Stage time.
Stage time. Just
a lot of stage time.
Yeah.
Take risks. If you're not doing well with your material, that is a sign for you in the moment to change it up.
Yes.
Fight to be the funniest you can be with your time on stage. Whether that means throwing all your jokes against the wall and then start riffing through the crowd.
Yeah.
Because you are going to learn tricks while you be in the room. Every show you're at, actually be in the room. Look at everybody who's watching you do comedy. And then I would just tell you, just rinse, repeat.
Yeah.
Dude, it's like, okay, for my processes is like, I think of something and then I go on stage and I start figuring out how to make it funny. Mm-hmm. Is it a story? Is it an idea? Is it something I hate? Like,
and that's something I really noticed about you, especially when I saw you last, is you're such a great storyteller.
Yeah. But that comes from just years of me being who I am.
Yeah.
And I would suggest no one do comedy the way I do it. I just, it's very unorthodox. I think of ideas, I work them out on stage, and once I realize where all like the punchlines are, I repeat it, and then I'm like, okay, this joke is finished.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yes.
But yeah, it takes a long time to get to that level. I just tell young comics all the time is watch comedy. I think here in the city in Toronto, people are so busy telling you that they did 14 mics, 15 mics, like they're bragging about it. Like, I did 18 mics today. But how much good comedy did you watch live? Zero?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's also, I think one thing, again, that Jerry Corley guy says is that you only improve at a skill when you've got two things, which is intentional practice and expert feedback. And so one of the things that I made sure to do is I had it on my like vision list of what I want to do is get a mentor. Okay. Like get a mentor.
Who's your mentor?
Do you know David Andrew Brent?
I do know David Andrew Brent.
Dave and I went to high school together. And so when I got into...
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So when I started getting into comedy, he and I kind of reconnected. And so I, about just over a year in, I asked him like formally, like, will you help me do this?
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we run material. He helps me, it's always just nice to have somebody who has walked the road before you.
Absolutely.
And like I said, intentional practice. So it's like, yeah, you could, I'm sure you've seen it at open mics where guys go up and do the same joke that doesn't work over and over and over and over again. Right. You're not going to, you can do that. You do that 14 times in a week. Well, you didn't get any better.
Yeah. Because maybe it's not the audience. Maybe it's this joke, or maybe you got to reword this or figure it out.
Yeah. It's like it worked once and then you won't let up on it. And because like I said, with, wife, kids, family, I'm only out about 3 to 4 nights a week, sometimes 5 if it's really busy.
I hear you.
But I try to maximize that time, and which is why, or like I try to do Zoom writing groups with comics who I trust, and we can punch up stuff. And so sometimes that's more effective than going to
it. That's cool because I'm very like I don't want anybody giving me input.
Oh, okay.
I would like to. The way I get better is suffering.
Sure. Well, I mean, like failure is a method of learning. So absolutely. I mean, it's not wrong. I just, for me, I try to think about how can I be the most efficient, right? How can I, like, it's not that I don't want to fail, but like, why fail if I can win?
So, okay. Here's my ultimate advice to you.
Yes.
Is do what works for you. Mm-hmm. Every seasoned comic, they're going to have their take on what you should do. But it's all what's right for you might not be what's right for me. Your process is your process. Mm-hmm. And if it makes you feel good and you're getting better through that process, keep doing that.
Yeah. I just always think that, you might not, if you learn something from someone else, you might not take all of it, but there might be a nugget in there that you really hold on to and use and is effective for you. So I always just try to learn from everybody, right? Because who knows what could help you turn a corner.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically it. It's just my do stage time.
Yeah.
Is as much as you can do for yourself.
Yes.
And don't get comfortable going to the same shows.
Okay.
Because if you want to be a world-class comedian, you got to try to go to like a show that has super left audience to a room that's full of just Italian people.
Yeah.
You want to be funny in every situation.
Absolutely.
Because you might get booked at a retirement home where everybody's 80 and you're getting big money, and now you got to make people that are 80 laugh.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's really, I find there's comics that in this city that do the same shows. They always do the same shows. And you take them out of that show into another atmosphere, and they're not going to swim like they do because they get bad habits. They form habits for certain audiences.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Or they're acclimatized or adapted to this environment
exactly.
that doesn't transfer necessarily to other ones. I hear that a lot. Like when I go outside the city, it's just like, what are you coming to Grimsby and talking about the subway for?
Yeah, yeah. They don't want to fucking hear that.
Yeah.
They don't want, like, I have material about me being biracial.
Yes.
Kills here.
Yes.
Kills. If there's any room with a lot of people of different ethnicities, killer.
Yes.
I can't go to fucking an hour away from here and talk about me being diverse. They don't care.
Yes.
But they can relate to me being married.
Yeah.
They can't relate to me going on vacation or me being a bad kid and all these other things. So I got to learn how to. My job at the end of the day is being paid to entertain a room of people that night.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you want to keep getting paid by that promoter again, that booker, then do your fucking job.
Yeah.
Entertain these people and you'll come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice. I think I don't know how long we've been doing it for, but we're we're at an hour, which is great. I always like to conclude with a lightning round.
Okay, go.
Are you ready? These
Absolutely.
are quick questions. Dinner with a historical figure. Who would you choose?
Dinner with a historical figure. I would choose Elvis Presley.
Elvis Presley. Okay, cool. Most bizarre food combination you've ever tried?
Twinkie hot dog.
Really?
UHF, the movie, Weird Al Yankovic.
Oh my gosh.
He does it, and I'm like, I gotta do
I
this.
gotta try this. Worst stand-up experience.
I have a couple. You want one or two?
Whatever you want to share.
So I once did a sign up, and I was last on the sign up, and I used to do this thing where I used to like get on stage and I wouldn't look up at the audience until I grabbed the mic, and I looked up and no one was in the room, and I just got sad by myself, and then another bad experience is that was probably the worst. That was probably the worst experience. Oh, I got a shot glass and this scar at at North by Northeast 2014, Keith Pedro's Rooftop Ruckus. I was opening, and it was at the Bovine Sex Club, and there was these people. There was this group of people that were like in their 50s, and I think they had been drinking there all day.
Yeah.
And I was on stage opening, and they were talking, and I just had asked them to stop, and I was making fun of them.
Yeah.
And a dude decided to throw a Sailor Jerry's, which is a heavy shot glass, into my head, hit me on stage. I started bleeding.
Yeah.
Jumped off stage, and then started to choke him from the crowd. And that was probably the worst experience. But it was infamous, and people definitely knew me after that.
That's I started choking him. That's a legendary story. I love that. Okay. Weirdest non-comedy job.
Probably Brazzers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's you did cover that.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite dick joke?
It's about the way. My favorite dick joke is about. I have a joke about how like I used to like masturbate to like Viewer's Choice when it was all blurry.
Yeah.
And I go, once I thought I saw dreadlocks and I thought I was jerking off to like Caribbean porn, and it cleared up, and then the whole time I had been jerking off to Predator 2. That's probably my favorite dick joke.
Are you an introvert or extrovert? But I get extrovert vibes from you.
In my younger years, I was an extrovert, but lately, I can be social, but I have become more of like, I think later in age, you just get into like, I'm good to be by myself.
That happened to me after kids.
Okay, dope. Yeah. I became an introvert. See, it happens. But I can turn on that extrovert, like when we're talking to people.
When you got that likability.
You're like, hey, what's going on? All right.
What would you change about yourself?
That I started stand-up earlier.
Do you believe in aliens?
I do.
Yes. Okay. Favorite childhood movie and favorite like current movie?
Favorite childhood movie would probably be The Lost Boys.
Okay.
And then favorite current. This is crazy. It's like asking me what my favorite song is. I got a lot. My favorite current movie. I'd want to. Oh man, this is a crazy question. I'd say Pulp Fiction.
Okay. Last one. Favorite holiday.
Christmas.
Okay, that's good.
No.
Well, Patrick Hakeem, thank you for coming out to
having me.
The Half-Hearted Podcast.
I was a good guest for you.
I think it was great. I felt like it flew by. Like I look over and we're at an hour, which is what I try to do. And
I'm glad that I did my part.
Yeah, you did. I feel like I didn't really have to do a lot of work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad that I could talk about myself a lot.
Thanks for coming, man.
Thanks for having me, bro.
Good.